Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Product View webinar. I'm here today with Product Evangelist Carolyn Kane, and today she's going to give us an introduction to UnityForms. I'm sure you're all very excited to begin today, but before we do, I just have a few quick notes for you. You'll notice that the lines are muted, and that's because we're recording today's presentation, and we're going to post that online to the OnBase product communities on users.onbase.com. However, we do encourage your questions, comments, and feedback, and you can type those into the question panel on your GoToMeeting screen. Carolyn will address some of those questions throughout today's presentation, and we'll leave some time toward the end for questions as well. And with that, we're ready to go, and I'll hand the microphone over to Carolyn.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to learn a little more about our new product, UnityForms. UnityForms is brand new in 11.0, so if you are looking to upgrade sometime in the future, and I definitely recommend it, there are so many exciting upgrades all across the platforms for 11.0. But what I'm most excited about is UnityForms because it gives us an entirely new option for creating electronic forms in OnBase. So you probably want to know, that's why you're here, what are UnityForms? Well, UnityForms are easily configurable electronic forms that provide a positive user experience. And the reason I worded the definition that way is because one of the major concerns that we had when we were developing this new product is that we wanted to create forms that were easy to configure and quick to create so that users could, or business users even, could easily create these forms and could then create processes there and workflow, and or they could have standalone forms. There's something they could get into their system very quickly. But we also wanted to provide a good user experience on the other side for the end users that are going to be eventually filling out those forms. So we wanted them to be able to have features that allow them to enter data more easily or eliminate some of that manual data entry that they would have to otherwise do. So we thought a lot about the design features and to make the designer's job a little easier, but we also thought about the end user's experience. So one of the problems that a lot of organizations have is that when you create electronic forms using HTML, they might require a technical resource because not everybody in the organization probably has those HTML skills. So when you have a technical resource, they can create these advanced HTML forms with scripted features. Now, if you have our eForms module or you have the workflow eForms combined license, then you have probably already created some of these eForms. And eForms are a great product because they can create completely customized forms using custom scripting and all sorts of custom coding. But for some organizations that don't have a lot of these technical resources, that could maybe be something of a barrier. And one of the problems with using HTML forms like eForms is that they often take a lot of time to design. And that might be something that is very worthwhile when you're creating highly customized advanced forms because you have all of these features that are going to be very, very important to your business process if it's a very complicated process or it has some very specialized parts. But when you might have a lot of other forms that you need to design that are smaller, more basic forms, the HTML still has a certain time component to it. So regardless of whether you're creating a highly advanced form or a simple form, HTML forms do take a lot of time to design them. And then we have this technical resource who probably has a large project backlog. Some of you who are system administrators, you know what it's like. You have a wish list of all of these things you'd like to get done. And so when you have HTML forms that are going to take a while to design, that is going to extend that backlog. You're not going to get through it as quickly because they're going to be taking up a lot of that time. And oftentimes technical resources aren't directly connected to the business process. So when they design the form, there might be some back and forth with whoever is a business process owner about what that form should look like and how it should be for people who are going to be filling it out on the end result. Or they might be outsourced. So that's a great option when you want to create highly customized forms to outsource that to maybe your reseller, or you have Hyland or somebody do that on another end. But when you outsource projects, you do lose the connection to your business process, and when you have a lot of forms, you'll have a lot of back and forth. And then maybe you might have somebody on the other end who's saying, well, we're not really going to put that into our budget to create all of these forms or have all these forms created by an outsourced company. So you might run into a lot of problems on that end. And then we have these business process owners. And they're the ones who are really closest to this process. And maybe they've already created some of these forms back before we went completely electronic. Maybe they had already laid them out, and then those are what the printed forms that they're using now, because they're most familiar with those forms and those processes. But they usually don't have a lot of HTML or scripting knowledge. You might run into one here and there, and that's great, but they usually don't, because their expertise lies in their department, and that's what they do every day. And they might even be able to configure workflow, because workflow does have a point-and-click configuration interface. So they might have even attended our workflow class, they can configure workflow, but because they don't have that HTML scripting knowledge, they would have to wait for that form to be designed. And creating forms and workflows aren't her only job tasks. So she has usually another job in her department, and so creating these forms and creating those workflows might sometimes go to the bottom of the list. And the longer that form takes to design, the less time she'll really have to do that. So we want to make sure that these business process owners have a little more time to focus on expanding the solution. So sort of an overview of some of the problems is that if you have HTML e-forms, a lot of times you have expensive resources that are required even for those simple forms, which might lead to less workflow development. Or continued reliance on paper forms, which we all know happens. If you have a large organization, you're probably going to have some areas that aren't in OnBase. They haven't quite made all of their forms automated and their processes automated yet. And the more barriers that we obstruct for that, the more we're going to find these places that are still kind of hanging on to their old processes. And then we often have a poor end user experience. So whether that's paper forms, which is always going to be a poor end user experience, or whether we have HTML forms that just haven't been designed with the user in mind. So that brings us to UnityForms. And like I said, it's a new product in 11.0. We're really excited about some of the features that we're going to show you today. So anybody can create professional forms using UnityForms. And professional forms, the professional theme with tab navigation and advanced features are really, really easy to accomplish using our point-and-click designer. And this can allow some organizations to have distributed form creation, which maybe they weren't able to do before when they had to have a single resource that was going to be creating those forms. But throughout the organization, we can have these business process owners create their own forms and publish them into OnBase, where they can become a part of a workflow, or they can just be a standalone form in order to capture that data into OnBase. And UnityForms make it easy to create that positive end user experience. And UnityForms do that with some advanced form features like calendars or date pickers. So whenever there's a date field, a calendar automatically pops up so that user can easily select the date that they want. And field validation. And that's something that a lot of HTML forms would struggle with, because it did require a lot of coding to validate that field and make sure that the data was going to be entered into OnBase the way we wanted it to appear in OnBase. And masking. Masking is something that's very easy to do on the keyword configuration level in OnBase, but then when you extend it to forms, you want to make sure that that data is going to match what is expected in OnBase. And tabbed navigations, and we're going to look at that later. That often helps organizations with long forms maximize screen real estate and make a better end user experience. And then we also offer user group-based security, the ability to show or hide features based on user group. So these are all features that used to require extensive coding for HTML forms, but now using UnityForms can be done without any coding whatsoever. UnityForms also have out-of-the-box support for international languages. including right-to-left languages. So for any of our organizations that have an international component, these forms can absolutely be available in more than one language and accessible in more than one language. And if your organization also has multiple platforms or browsers that are being used across the organization, this is really common in education, then there's no more having to do a quality check of all of your forms on all those different platforms or browsers, because we've already done that for you. All of our supported platforms and browsers are fully supported with UnityForms. And as we continue to have upgrades to the different platforms, the different browsers, and our software, we'll continue to address that. And a really exciting feature is that we now have an auditable form field history for UnityForms. So if you go to the document history window, this is in the Unity client. If this doesn't look familiar to you, this is what the document history window looks like in the Unity client. And there's an additional tab that will appear when any changes have been made to a form. And that will allow users to see who changed what fields and when they changed them. So this all can become possible because we have a point-and-click designer. And this will make it easy to create these forms with all of these advanced form features. Just a little tour before we actually see the software. The way the designer is set up is we actually have a toolbox that has all of the controls, all of the keywords, the keyword groups that you're going to be able to drop onto your form. And then we have a properties grid, which when you select a control or a keyword box, that actually, the properties grid will allow you to fine-tune that. And we're going to take a look at that. That's where we're going to add things like security and masking. And then because you are able to create multi-page forms with the tab navigation, in the designer you would navigate using this thumbnail view. And we're going to see when we look at the software that you do have a tab navigation when end users eventually use that form. So some of the features that are available in the designer is we have the designer toolbar. It's on the ribbon toolbar. It's available in the Unity client. If you already use the Unity client, this might look sort of familiar to you. If you don't, this is another tab that will appear when you have the rights to UnityForms. And this toolbar contains all of the options you need to create open forms, publish them into OnBase, share them, make them visible to certain user groups. We have a test drive option that I will show you. That's our preview option. And we also have the option to save this as a draft. So if we're creating a form and we want to just save it as a draft on our desktop and continue working on it, then we have the option to do that as well without publishing it into OnBase. So the preview option is something that is exclusive to UnityForms. Because you can use test drive to preview that form before it's published into OnBase. So if you click on the test drive button that's up there in the toolbar, you'll get our test drive preview window that will show up, and it will allow you to preview things like autofill keyword sets that reside in OnBase, and previously we were only able to check those once we had imported a form into OnBase, but now it can be previewed before it's a live form in OnBase. And field masking, which is something that we want to make sure all of that data is entered into OnBase the way we want it to appear in OnBase, so it's a wonderful thing to be able to test drive. And then we also have another exclusive feature, which is this role-based impersonation. So if you have set up a form that has that user group-based security or shows and hides sections or pages according to the user groups, then here you can actually check what groups you want to impersonate, and you can see what's available for them on the form. So that's a really great way to check and make sure that your security is working the way you want it to. And then if you have any external forms, or you have forms that may need to become available on an external website or an intranet site or even a SharePoint site, or even sometimes you might just want to email a link to somebody with so that you can direct them to that form, we actually have a really easy way to do that now. Our Share Form option is available also in the toolbar, and if you click that button, you get our Share Form dialog. which once you've filled in information that's specific to your solution, such as your server, your authentication, then it generates a URL that you can email or you can make available on a website. But we also have the option to embed these forms into an external web page or even an intranet site so that that form becomes completely part of the website that it is appearing on. But it's actually a live form in OnBase. So it appears to be seamless with that website, but it actually is an OnBase form. It resides in OnBase. Things like autofills, data sets, all work because it is an OnBase form. And I also wanted to mention template revisions. This is something that I know a lot of customers have used with eForms, and the same concept is available with UnityForms because forms can change as business needs change. So if you have a form, maybe it's later we're going to build an application for employment. So if you have your application for employment and you have, you know, the name, the email address, the mobile phone number, you might find that at some point you need to add another phone number for your candidates because maybe you're seeing a lot of them. So so you can actually, I don't know why this has gone ahead. Sorry, I've jumped ahead. You can actually make your changes to your template, publish it, and then all of the forms from that point forward will have all of the new fields that you've added. But the forms that were submitted prior to publishing your revision will actually be rendered within the old template so that there's not a lot of confusion and that appears to be very correct to people who are going to access that form. So we want to do this because we want to shorten process cycles. And we can do that by allowing people to capture data sooner. So if we have a long development cycle that's associated with forms, if we have eForms, we're using a third-party designer, and then we need to import those form templates. And then we can make eForms external, and we also can make them available to OnBase users. But the part that takes the longest here is that design phase. So between designing that form and importing that form into OnBase, we have a lot more steps. But with UnityForms, we can actually shorten that design phase, and we can get those forms published to the external users, to the OnBase users, a lot faster. So our design phase is a lot shorter. And so that can actually save us time for a lot of our projects. And like I said before, eForms are great for those customized situations where we need to have custom forms. But for the majority of our forms, we usually find that they tend to be fairly simple, and they need some simple validation and some just the ability to put a date picker on. So for those, we actually want to just shorten those process cycles, and we can start capturing that data right away. Okay, do we have any questions so far?
I do have a few questions that have come in. The first question, can you briefly address how to configure UnityForms for user input as a substitute for form display HTML form for this doc?
Well, that's a workflow action. So I'm actually not really going to go into detail about the workflow actions. We are going to see a screen later. But as far as configuring those forms for user input, you can absolutely use UnityForms. There are two brand new actions in workflow to display that Unity form. But they can't be used at this time as a substitution for user forms in workflow. That still needs to be HTML.
Is there a way to convert eForms to UnityForms?
No, there is not a way to convert eForms to UnityForms. And we're going to look at the point-and-click designer in a minute. And so in a lot of cases, it may be easy to very quickly convert them just because it's so easy to create them. But if you have extensive forms and you want to convert them to UnityForms, it would be something you'd have to do manually. But something that's important to note is that eForms and UnityForms can absolutely be used together in the same solution. So if you have eForms that are serving you very well, there's really no reason to convert them. You can continue to use them. If at some point you want to convert them over, you can use that eForm right up until the moment that you publish that Unity form. and then you can disable the eForm so that people will continue to use that Unity form day forward. So that's something that can be done over time.
Are form fields secured using OnBase user groups?
Yes, and we will actually see that in the demo. So I'll give a little more detail when we take a look at that.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions on the version that the version of OnBase that UnityForms are available in, and which client is required to use UnityForms.
Okay. And I had this information at the end of the presentation, but probably good information to know. UnityForms are available in OnBase 11.0, and you do need to upgrade your system to OnBase 11.0 in order to use UnityForms. They are available for users to fill out and submit forms in the Unity client and the web client. There is not support currently for the thick client. In order to design the forms, you do need to have Unity. That's where the designer resides.
Okay. Can you include a logo on a Unity form?
At this point, this is our #1 enhancement request, and I can tell you that it's been being taken very seriously for the next release. But for the initial release, you are going to find, since we'll go through the designer, you will see all the features that are there. Any features that you see that you would like that are not there may already be on their way. They're already working on 11.2, or they might be something that we would be happy to add in future releases. Unity forms have been really thoughtfully designed, and so for this release we have a really great stable product that does make it easy to create the majority of forms. But there are a lot more features that people use, maybe less often than our most popular features, but they do use them, and so we're continuing to add them to this really great product, and it will continue to be developed. So contact your reseller or contact Hyland if you're a direct customer, and let your sales representative know that these are features you want, and they will go through the formal process of requesting it.
And can you take a Unity form that has been created and enhance it as an HTML form?
No, this is not available, and I will tell you why. It's not because we want to cramp your style. We will continue to offer 2 forms products. We will have Unity Forms, which I will show you the features that are available now, and like I said, we want to add new features to the product. So if you have something that you currently use custom scripting for, it might be a feature that will really benefit a lot of users. So I definitely think that you should contact your reseller or your sales support and talk to them about what features you'd like to see in there. And so we will offer the 2 completely separate forms products, and eForms are highly customizable. Unity forms are easy to create. And the reason we don't let you create the form and then put your own coding into it at this point, there may in the future be support for some coding, but that's because it's really difficult for us to continue to develop the software. Every time we would have a release, if people were adding custom coding, we might possibly break all their forms, which is not something that we want to do. So that's why we have these 2 very separate offerings right now. And when you see the demo, you might find that a lot of the features you used to require custom scripting for, you actually can do in Unity Forms already. Okay, so we are probably going to move on. Keep those questions coming. I love to hear them. And all of your questions and suggestions we take very seriously. So when you ask questions about whether things are available, if they're not currently available, that is something that we take very seriously, because we want to make this a product that is very usable for you. So if you have not seen the Unity client before, that's where we're going to be for our demonstration, because that's where our designer is. Before we go ahead and go into the designer, though, I just want to show you an existing form that I've already created so that when we go into the designer, you understand what some of the features are. And I've already brought up an onboarding checklist here. So, so this is a form I created in Unity Forms, and right now we have just this one template, but more templates are coming in a future release with different colors and the option to customize them a little further. And I created this form with an autofill keyword set, just like you're used to seeing. So all these features or these values have come in so that we can eliminate some of that manual data entry where maybe I might make a mistake. And we can add information that's not in that autofill keyword set. We have the option with UnityForms to create these collapsible sections. So here, this is administrative only, and we have defaulted it to collapsed. You can default them to expand it as well so that somebody can close it if they wish. But here, we don't think that most people are going to want to see that information. So it's collapsed. That'll maximize your screen real estate. Then we have this great tabbed navigation, so that this is probably one of the most commonly scripted features that we had for eForms. And when we go through the tabs, we see these different sections. And in this process, we have this form, and that's a lot of different departments that are responsible for onboarding a new employee. So here we are in the Information Services section, and we have somebody who's from IS, and they need to assign the user ID, create the user account. So we have all these checkboxes for them. And if I was signed in as somebody from Information Services, I would only see the tab for Employee Information and Information Services. I wouldn't see all these other tabs. We have the ability to do that with UnityForms. But I'm a super user today. And so I can check off some of those checkboxes, things I've done, and maybe I have obtained that hardware already, and I'm going to put on the kind of equipment that they have. And so what I'm using is, this is called, this is actually a multi-instance keyword group, and this is a repeating section. So what we can do is we can enter in our information, and because we don't know how many different types of equipment will be assigned to any particular employee at any given time, we have the ability to enter it now, and then when we add more pieces of hardware or software, we can just add another section at runtime. So we are not tied down to something that's been hard-coded into the form. So this is dynamic, and this is just able to add or remove as many of them as we want. And then some other things that might be familiar to you, just a multi-line text box, so that people can just enter in comments. And we can submit it. And this actually does go into a workflow so that it can, be moved throughout the process. But before we talk about UnityForms and workflow, let's go ahead and take a look at the designer. Sorry, there's a little lag between GoToMeeting and my actual virtual machine here. So, nope, we don't want to create a new form. And we're going to go to the designer. So the designer is available just via a button on the toolbar. If you've already upgraded to 11.0 and you don't see the designer button in your toolbar, that's because you do need to license it, and I will discuss the licensing later. It is a separate license, but it's available to you at no cost, so you just need to have that activated. And my designer is not loading for me. So I'm just going to restart my Unity client for a minute here. This always happens to me when I undock my computer. Something always doesn't work the way that it worked when I tried it up at my station. So I'm going to type in my username and password. If you haven't seen the new Unity client login screen, a lot of people weren't a fan of the old login screen, but now we've modernized it. And if you attend our What's New in 11.0, Colleen Albert has a lot to say about what's new in the Unity client in 11.0. It's really quite exciting. Definitely recommend that you go ahead and sign up for What's New in 11.0. A lot of really great features. But now we're working properly again. And so we could open that form that I already had created if we wanted to do that. We're going to create a new form though. And we're actually going to create two forms today. And before you say, whoa, Carolyn, I don't have enough time for that. The first one we're going to create is going to be really simple and easy. So we have different template layouts here. And we can do a blank one and start from scratch. We have this, what we call a standard layout. It's just a one-page layout, or we have multi-page. And for this first form, we're just going to do the standard layout. And then you come to a little wizard that asks you about what document type group and document type you're going to want to have this Unity form be a part of. And so I configured all these behind the scenes in configuration, just like you configure any document type. And so I had already configured the document type and all the keywords. Then you want to give it a friendly name, because this is what's going to show up on the list of available forms. And I have the option here to add keywords, and that's what we're going to do right away. Oh, I jumped ahead. We're doing the employee profile first. Sorry, I almost ruined my own surprise. Okay, so we want an employee profile here. All right, and so we've added the keywords, and what that does is all the keywords that are associated with the document type, it's just going to add them to the form. And this is just a way to make a quick and easy form. It's added all of them to the form for me. So I just need to make a few adjustments. I definitely probably am going to want to change the header so that it says employee profile. Oops. This is the problem when I'm facing the other direction and trying to type turned away. So the header now says employee profile. Maybe we want to put in some instructions, or we want to put in an extra text field maybe. And something that we want the user to input, and user ID maybe here. And so we've just added something that wasn't a keyword. It's a non-keyword field. We can put in a text box if we want, so that maybe we want to put in some comments. But essentially this form is done. So this is just a really simple form. We want to make it quickly. Maybe it initiates a workflow, or it's something that we're going to have workflow create for us. And we don't need a lot of bells and whistles. It doesn't need to be fancy. We just want to get that form done. So it's essentially done. And we can test drive it if we want to, so we can see, how the data set works and how the date picker works. But we like it. It's done. We're going to publish that into OnBase. It gives us a little warning. It's just tell you in case you press the wrong button, you're about to publish that form, and it kind of tells you a little bit about that. But we know that. And we can publish it in OnBase. It's now available for our users to fill out. It's available for workflow to use. It's available for all of the things that you can do in OnBase. So that's sort of my ta-da demonstration. And now we're going to go ahead and just look at a few more of the features with another form. So we're back to this template layout dialog. We're going to create a multi-page form this time. And it's also going to be an HR form. And you saw that I kind of stole my own thunder here. We already had created that. And so imagine here that you are actually in human resources. Some of you may be in human resources, so it's not going to be quite a stretch. And you already have all these forms. You might have already designed some of these when you made your paper application that people come in and fill out. So you're very familiar with all of this. And all you have to do is, if this document type has been created with the keywords, then you just can go in and design your own form. And I'm doing this live for you today so you can see how easy it is. And we do have some training classes coming up. If you're going to OTTC, there's a training class for how to create Unity forms. So if I'm moving a little fast for you today, it's because today we're just taking a look at it. And I just want you to see how easy it is. But when you actually have the product and you need some more training, we do have options for that. So this is going to be an employee application. And we've changed our header there. And this has given us a 3-page template. That's what's standard, but we don't want to have all those pages. We're only going to use 2 pages, so we're going to just get rid of that so it doesn't confuse us anymore. So now we have 2 pages here. Probably want to decide what's going to be on each page. And the first page is going to be some of that information about the employee. And we're going to change the tab as soon as I click on the right spot. There we go. Because we don't want to say page 1. So that's going to be our applicant information. And you see we have the option here to secure that. So if this wasn't something we wanted everybody to be able to see, we would check that. But it is something we want everybody to be able to see. And once we check that, we could put our user groups on there. But we're just going to name that right now. And then we can start adding information. Now, UnityForms has its own vocabulary for some of these different controls. Obviously, you're probably familiar with checkboxes and things like tables are pretty familiar. But we also have things. We have a section, which we're going to use here. And I'm just clicking on it. I get a little crosshairs here that tells me that I can put that there. And everything here is customizable as far as putting a new label on that. And we have options here to expand, collapse it, secure it, anything that we want to do here. You might notice here I'm kind of going a little quickly through there, but we also have tooltips so that if you get here and you don't know what a section is, then it'll tell you what it is so that you know the difference between them. And so that's great as you're learning it. And then as you get to know it, like I know that pretty well, you don't even have to pay attention to those. So here we're just going to, we have keywords that we want to put in here. This is our applicant information. And so these are just things like name and social security number. And maybe you're thinking, wow, this is going to be a really long form if you just keep stacking things one on top of each other. And that's absolutely true. I am going to add something we call a panel. And that is the ability to create columns. Oops. And I can specify, do I want 1, 2, or 3 columns? I want 2. And then I'm going to start adding things to my panels. And so here, you see I didn't really want my name, I didn't want my social security number up there all by themselves. I can just move them into the panel. So it's easy to make mistakes and it's easy to correct them, which I really like. And then back to my keywords, and maybe I want to put their phone information in here, and they have an alternate phone number. So those are all keywords. They are linked to the keywords in OnBase. You can change any of these labels. That's maybe not, it's what the keyword is called, but it's maybe not what we want on the form. And we can keep adding things like that. And this form obviously would then have address information and things like that on there, but we're not going to keep doing that. You get the point. So something else that we can add in here that I really love are these repeating sections. Now you saw that I used a repeating section on the demo form that was a multi-instance keyword group. So you can, in fact, if you have a multi-instance keyword group on your form, then it will automatically be added as a repeating section. But you can also use them for non-keyword fields. So if I put this in here, on an employee application, we want to put in prior work experience because we don't know how many. We could specify that you need at least 3 companies prior to applying, but some people only have 1, and some people would like to list 5. So you don't know how many, and instead of hard coding those into the form, we are actually just going to make that a repeating section so that at runtime they can hit that add button and they can add any of the extra companies or contact information references that they want. So here we put in a panel with maybe 3 columns, and we want to put in, oops, I don't know why I collapsed that, because we want to put in text boxes. And that would be information about the company, years you've been there, which will lead us to the ability to configure some of these things. So here, let's make this our date that we started working at this company. So this is not a keyword. So as far as this form knows right now, it's a text field, but we want to make it a date field because we want to get that date picker. So we just get this really easy dialog. We can decide if we want it to be a number, text, currency. We want it to be a date. We could set a minimum or maximum date. We can make it required. We're not going to do any of that. And then you see that we get that little guide that shows you it's going to be month, day, year, year, year. And we can do the same one here because they probably don't work there anymore. And we'll make that a date as well. Just in case you didn't catch it the first time, we'll click this little button and we will get our dialog. It's a date. We don't want a minimum or maximum for this one, and we're done. It's that easy to create that. And if you used to configure any kind of date pickers for eForms, or maybe you continue to, you know that there's a fair amount of script that goes into that. And it's really easy when I have the same one I copy and paste from every form that I create, but sometimes I just don't have a complete tag in there. I copy it in slightly the wrong place. Then I have to go in and figure out what I did wrong. So this is so easy to just go ahead and put that right in there. Now, when we want to talk about masking, we have 2 options here to go ahead and mask. With the Social Security number, that's something that's already been set up in the keyword configuration, and we, of course, don't want to change that. So that mask already comes in for us, and exactly the way we'd want a Social Security number to be masked. But our phone number hasn't been masked in OnBase. There's a lot of different ways people can enter a phone number. And this is just how it's going to show up for users so that they have this guide, and it's also going to be validated against this mask. So we want them all to be numbers. We have an area code, and then we have the first 3 digits and the last 4, which is phone numbers in the U.S. If you're joining us from another country, I apologize if it's not the same format. So we put in, this is how many numbers we want, and then these are going to be the characters that we want to show up for the user to guide them, but they're not going to be saved in the database. So this ensures that it's going to be the right format. And if we want to check that, we can go to our test drive option. And we see we have our Social Security number here. We want that to be masked correctly. That's great. And then for phone number, we want that to come in exactly the way we want that phone number to appear. So, and that's how it will appear for users when they access that form as well. So that works great. We love it. So now you're asking me, that's all great, Carolyn. Let's talk about the security you told me about. This is something that was very difficult to do in, or is very difficult to do in eForms. It's not impossible, especially we've got a great class at OTTC that has a really great example of showing and hiding things based on the user who's logged in. And so that's absolutely possible and wonderful with eForms. And I don't know why I have such a hard time clicking on this one section. It's probably just me forgetting where exactly I'm supposed to click. Okay, well this will be our HR section, and I will rename that as soon as I remember where I'm supposed to click. And so for HR, maybe we just want to have a text box in here for comments. And I'm just going to put comments on there. But we don't want anybody to see this. So this might be something an HR person is going to be writing about the candidate. And so we don't want just anybody to be able to see this. So we do want to secure it. and that is going to require that I click in the right place. There we go. We got it. And so this is going to be HR, and we do want to secure it. So we're going to check this box. And then we're going to determine who's going to be able to see it. So we just have a pop-up dialog. We want human resources to see it. Maybe we don't even want the manager to be able to see it, just human resources. This is their own personal section here. And so that's secured. So if we go to test drive, we get a new option as user group impersonation. So right now, we're just the manager. We don't have rights to see it. But if we want to add human resources and we want to be able to see it from their perspective, then we get the second tab here. And I guess we didn't really look at this before either. Our prior work experience shows up so that we can put that in. We'd probably also have some information in there. Comments or describe our position, something like that. And then we can add another one for the second one. We can keep going on and on. So this test drive option is great, and I've used it a lot to check my layout and make sure that everything makes sense as you're filling out the form. That's something really important for users. You know, if you have a disconnect between something like your street address and your city, when they start to move through that form, it's going to be very difficult for them to fill it out. So that's really great to be able to test that before it's a live form. So another quick thing that allows you to customize these forms is the ability to put in a paragraph. And you can use something like a paragraph. This is just going to put text on there that's not going to change. So maybe we want to put in instructions or information about where they go if they have any problems. And it'll just give them static text that will always show up in the form. So those are pretty much the features that I find are really popular. And it looks like we have a lot of questions here, so I just want to go ahead and get to some of those questions.
What's the max number of columns you can have in a Unity form?
On the panel, it's 3, and that's because at this point we don't actually have the ability to make those fields customized as far as size. So that's the max that you probably want to put across a form. If you have a multi-instance keyword group and you add it as a table, you can actually have more than that. But if you're using panels, the max is 3.
And do UnityForms support login form proc?
Oh, that's a really great question. UnityForms have feature parity with eForms as far as making them external. So we have the ability to make them external, but we don't use login form proc per se. So what we have is we have the ability to share that form, and we do that once it's published. So we have the share form option actually generates either a URL or it generates an iframe tag that you can use to embed that form onto your website. So it's a little different than login form proc, but it does go through the web server, and so you have all of the security and protections that is available to you through the web server.
And do you configure UnityForms in OnBase configuration or in Unity?
The Unity forms are designed in the Unity client. The document types and keywords are still configured in OnBase configuration.
Can CSS be used to brand the form after it's created?
Not at this point. And like I said, the ability to customize forms is something that's coming in our future releases. There's already some ability that our developers have been working on for 11.2. So these are the basic features we wanted to, if people wanted to get started using them immediately, we wanted to make sure we had a great solid product with 75% of the features that people use all the time.
And are cascading data sets and encrypted keywords supported in UnityForms?
No, encrypted keywords are not supported at this time, and cascading data sets are also not supported. That's something that I know has been mentioned, but definitely put that in as an.
Okay, sorry about that. It seems like we may have lost audio for a second. Let us know if you can't hear us. Okay, it seems like we're back on air now. Thanks for staying with us. Can you embed an HTML query with UnityForms?
Custom queries, I'm assuming. Custom queries are not available with UnityForms right now. It sounds like a great enhancement request.
And can a user import a Microsoft Word template and add keywords onto the template after it's imported?
No, there is no ability right now to use any Microsoft templates with UnityForms. But if you use our Office modules that are that give you the ability to use Microsoft Office with OnBase, you can use templates. So it's not available with UnityForms, but if you want to use those templates for some of the things you're creating, you absolutely can do that with some of our other modules.
Okay, we have a few questions. If data can be entered longer than at 250 characters?
I'm not really sure what you're referring to, maybe in the multi-line text box.
Keywords can be up to 250 characters. Is there a way to save?
That UnityForms respect all of the limits that are available in OnBase. So you could probably enter them. I'm not sure. I haven't tried that, to enter something more than 250 characters if you don't set a limit, but OnBase will not save those characters.
And a question from earlier in the presentation, can you repeat what, if anything, UnityForms cannot be substituted for in workflow?
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of slides that I have here. First, before we get to that, just to reiterate, we do have full integration with the Unity client and with the web client, and UnityForms also are able to be used with Application Enabler and Workflow. So here is in 11.0, here is what you would see in Workflow when you're configuring a new action. And you have the ability to create a Unity form and display a Unity form for input. And so this is feature parity with what's available for eForms currently. Now there's sometimes some confusion because we have something we call user forms in Workflow, which are not specifically eForms, but they are HTML forms that are used in Workflow. So Unity forms cannot at this time be used as a user form, but they can be used in the exact same way that eForms were previously available in Workflow. And so if we're in Workflow and we have selected the action type to create that Unity form, here's some of the options that are available. You can choose the form type, you can inherit those common keywords, or you can specify keyword values, you can display it for input. And some of the things that are new here is the ability to, we have two things that used to be buttons that were specific on eForms, but now are just going to be built into to the workflow action, which is allowing that user to discard the changes and continue, or discard the changes and cancel. So those are two things that you used to have to hard code a button into an eForm with, but now you can do that. It's just built into the action. And before we get all the workflow questions, I also want to just show you that it's available with Application Enabler. So with a single click or a keyboard event, you could bring all your values from your line of business system, and you can populate that Unity form and submit that into OnBase. And if you're familiar with Application Enabler, you'll see that there's this new context on our context list that allows you to do that. And then you can specify that Unity form that you want to be displayed. So licensing, I mentioned earlier, it is available to you at no cost if you already own the eForms or eForms Workflow Combined license. If you don't own either of those, then I would recommend that you get them because you will get UnityForms free. And it must be activated to begin using it. So contact Hyland or your reseller to activate that license, and then you can begin using it. So let's continue with the questions.
Okay. Is there a different appearance on the forms if you mark an element as required?
Oh, I can't believe I didn't do that. There is, certainly, if you mark it as required. Let's mark name. Of course, that should be required here. And so you get a little red star. And then if we were to put in, we were to not put that in, let's say that we have, let's say that we're just going to mess this up a little bit here. It validates it and it will give you a red box that will tell you, no, you need to do this. And if we hover over it, there's it will tell us that what it's supposed to look like. And so the same thing will happen with the required, although I'm not submitting it yet. So oh, we didn't format that. So that if you don't fill out the name, you try to submit it, it will become red and it will give them a little validation box, just like it does with the masks. So that's a great question. I'm sorry I missed that.
Okay, and can you briefly speak to why a user might consider using OnBase UnityForms versus a forms tool in a legacy application?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, certainly the fact that it's native in OnBase is a huge opportunity for people to have these forms be fully integrated in OnBase and fully integrated with workflow. And as we upgrade OnBase, the UnityForms will continue to be upgraded, whereas sometimes with integrations with legacy products or integrations with other products, there is sometimes a difficulty whenever you have an integration, making it fully integrated. So you upgrade and some of the things might be different. You upgrade that product, some of the things might be different. So it's native in OnBase, and we are going to continue evolving this product as well. So I think it's going to be even more exciting as we see the next release.
Okay, we do have a bunch more questions, but just for those of you who have to leave us early today, we would like to remind you that a recording of today's presentation will be available on the new OnBase product communities on users.onbase.com. You'll see the logo at the top of the page, and these are your new official source of product information, and you can access the recording on the UnityForms community. Okay, back to our questions. If your template started as a single blank page form, can you edit it to create a multi-page form later based on user needs?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that I'm not 100% sure about. I know in a beta release that we had, you were not able to add those pages later. So I'll actually address that on the blogs. Thank you. That's a great question. I haven't tested that yet.
If a Unity form is in workflow, does the security follow it as well?
Yes, yes. If it's in workflow, workflow will respect all of the security that's applied to the Unity form, and vice versa. Unity form will respect any workflow security.
Does the application server need to be reset before the form is available to assign in configuration or workflow?
That is an excellent question. Actually, you don't need to assign the form in configuration at all. So what you used to have to do with eForms, or you have to assign it to the document type, that's already been done. So, but in order to add it to workflow, I haven't tried to add it to workflow, but it is available for users to start using right away. So, so we'll have to test that and see if it's available right away in workflow. But I haven't had any problem with having users just start using it as soon as I publish it in OnBase.
And does this product integrate with Ultra Data banking software at this time?
Well, I'm not sure how you're integrating with OnBase from your banking software. If you are using Application Enabler, then certainly that's not going to be a problem at all, because Application Enabler can use UnityForms. If you have a custom integration, and I'm not sure how some of the things in the financial industry work, then that might be something you want to contact your sales representative about, and we'll make sure that we make that available.
Okay, in the onboarding request form that you showed in your demo, can workflow recognize the value of a checkbox and then route that form appropriately?
Excuse me. All the code that's on the back end is available for workflow to recognize. So I haven't tried to make that checkbox available, but what happens when you have the checkbox is you can assign a value to it, and then it is exposed to workflow to use. So
Okay, and was there a technical reason for not adapting this process for eForms?
I'm assuming that you mean for not creating an HTML editor in order to create eForms specifically. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And one of them is that actually UnityForms are they're HTML, but the HTML is actually generated on the server to display at runtime. The HTML is actually not saved anywhere. It's actually XML, which is on the back end. So it just gives us a lot more flexibility and to move towards the future, because we really felt that HTML was not necessarily going to give us all the options that we needed to make these advanced forms easily available to everybody.
And is it possible to export a Unity form so that it can be used in another OnBase system? For example, moving the form from test to production.
Yes. Right now, that needs to be done through workflow, import, export, because what happens is when you use the UnityForms designer, you are actually tying it to the keywords, keyword names, keyword numbers in the database that you're working in. But with workflow, import, export, you do have the ability to remap all of that. So if you have a business case for where you're going to need to move those from test to production and they're not a part of a workflow, then I recommend you submit that as an enhancement request. That sounds like a great one to me.
And can a user assign hotkeys or tab order for navigation?
That is not something that I'm aware of that's available at this time. It also sounds like a great enhancement.
Can data submitted by UnityForms be encrypted?
UnityForms does not support the encrypted keywords, and I'm not sure how they behave in encrypted disk groups. That is a great blog post. I'm going to have to get back to you on that.
Can you search forms on non-keyword fields?
That is an excellent question. If you are using our full text search for autonomy or our autonomy full text search, then UnityForms are fully searchable. So all the fields are available for search.
And can attachments be submitted with a Unity form?
That is not something that's available right now. I have heard it discussed, but if you have a great business case, definitely contact somebody to get that rolling on the official software enhancement request.
Can the Unity forms be printed?
Yes, Unity forms can be printed. Right now, it's available. The way you see the form is the way it will be printed.
Okay, in the designer, when you create a form, can you see the source code generated?
No, the source code is not available to view or to edit at any time.
How has Hyland tackled the aspect of printing a multi-line text area when the text is hidden below the text box?
That's an excellent question, and that's something that has been brought up a lot once we've had this first release. And I know it's a requirement in many industries from a legal perspective. And I think that if you have a great business case and you're using that right now in your organization, please submit that as an enhancement request. Right now, what you see is what's going to be printed. So I know that's not going to work for certain industries, and we would love to make that work for you.
Can you secure individual fields, or is this based on tabs only?
The security is available at the section level and at the page level. So the different sections that I showed you where we can group the different controls are available to be secured, but it's not available right now at the field level. All these are great enhancement requests. Definitely get them in.
When might the ability to add calculations as well as to utilize a signature pad be added?
Oh, that's a great question. Signatures are being worked on we're hoping, in the next release. And what was the other part of that question? I got excited over signature pads. That's also my module. That's what happens when you ask me about signature pads. I get really excited. If you're still here, go ahead and tell me the second half of your question. I've now forgotten it.
Is there a print preview option to see how the form will look when printed out or emailed?
I have not tested the print or looked for a print preview, so that's another question that I will get back to you on. There's so many components to this, and I know that you have so many needs when you deal with forms that your questions are great. I will continue to keep looking at the software, keep testing the software, and answering your questions as we learn more about it.
How does Hyland handle printing a multi-page form?
That's an excellent question. I have only printed a single-page form. I really thought I had this tested for you. I'll address that on the blogs as well. These are great questions. Thank you very much.
Oh, the other part of that question that...
The ability to perform calculations. Yes. Thank you. I'm so glad you're still here. That is something that has been discussed, and I know that it's been brought up several times. So I'm not sure exactly when that will be implemented. I'm not sure if it's slated for the next release or not, but it's on our radar, and you know, every time that you go through the official channels for that software enhancement request, then we have logged in your reasons for it. So that will help us get that into the software faster.
And does a reseller have the ability to configure UnityForms for a customer to use through the web client if the client has not purchased the Unity server?
That's a great question. I'm not really sure how that would work, because right now it would have to be a part of a workflow and you'd have to export it. So that might be something that you can do if you export it as part of a workflow and import it, and then might be available for use in the web client. But I do not know that for sure. So I will check on that as well. These are all really great questions. I appreciate everybody sticking around and asking all these questions, and I look forward to seeing all of your software change requests come in with your new enhancements.
Okay, it looks like those are the last of the questions we have for today. Again, as I said earlier, you can access a recording of today's presentation on the new OnBase product communities, accessible from users.onbase.com, and you'll just go to the UnityForms community to find that. So with that, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Carolyn, and we hope you all have a great afternoon.
Have a great day.